things, if you keep everything in ASCII. Another part of the simplicity was we had one CVS repository for everything. Let's see. We can talk more about CVS later. But this repository had our schedule, our to-do lists, our outline. When we'd get reviews, chapters would be submitted to the publisher and we'd get comments back from, they'd farm it out to people in the industry, and we'd get these reviews. We'd check that into the repository, and as we sort of had an ASCII check mark as we addressed each concern that the reviewer had. So everything's in one repository. And also part of the simplicity is that we left the fancy formatting to the publisher. We were LaTeX geeks, but rather than doing the more fancy stuff, we just put in square brackets, note to formatter, put this in a square box or whatever. Sort of the importance of delegation. I know all the big LaTeX fans in the room are like, well, putting a box around it, it's easy. You just, no, it's, we want to focus on writing. Clarity. Clarity is about processes that are clear and understandable, so there's less confusion. So we had, anytime we had to come up with a process, it was the minimal process that meets all the requirements. Using the right tool at the right time. Clarity to us is also about using open protocols. You can gain a huge amount of simplicity by defining what protocol the server is going to accept and let users pick their own client. I'll talk more about that. And the right level of security. So communication. We had, these are our three basic communication tools. We had in-person meetings, phone, and email. In-person, very expensive, but great for high interaction kind of stuff. So we used that when we were brainstorming. Phone calls, we tried to keep phone calls to problem-solving, brainstorming, and status meetings. And email we used for logistics and notifications. If you notice, we didn't use email as a file transfer mechanism. That's what the file repository was for. If we needed to send each other a file, we'd put it in the repository and just email the URL, or really the path name. So did we really have 7 meetings? This is our documented proof that we actually only have met 7 times. And the last one was to celebrate the completion of the book. So really 6 times in the process of writing the book. And the next time we're going to see each other will be in November at the Unix Lisa conference. And we're teaching 2 tutorials together. We're also giving this presentation as an invited talk. Now, she's given this presentation a couple times. I've given it a couple times, but we've never given it together. So I don't know. We're not sure how we're going to do this. I was thinking, I'll do the odd pages. She'll do the even pages. Or, it's just I just want someone in the audience to count how many times someone says something and then the other one of us says, "That's not what I say for this slide." Okay. So repository is a communication tool. So these are all the different things we had in our repository. All as ASCII files. One of the most important was the hot issues to-do list. It literally listed every single chapter in the groupings, in the order we were going to write them, and stood out various hot issues that needed to be taken care of. At the top of the file were urgent issues, and everything else was sort of buried within the monthly schedule. And then I think we put a capital X at the beginning of any line that was completed, sort of to cross it off. And so you could easily grep the lines without the capital X and see what needs to be done. We also archived any chapter that we submitted to the publisher. We were submitting them in PostScript so we could just check them into the repository. And this became very important because we'd get reviews back that were just simply, page 37, line 6, remove the letter A. Well, we've written 10 chapters then, and they were all before that. So that's, anyway, you can see the problems that would cause. Back to the 7 principles, 6 principles. Generality. This is a quickie. one repository, Generality is a single solution that solves many problems. And if you've read the Kernighan and Pike book on programming, they do some amazing things with Generality. They'll start an algorithm and make it more general, and in the process it gets faster because they've also cleaned up the code along the way. So a lot of people think that Generality can bog you down. We think that Generality can actually solve problems. Another example of Generality is the single format for every chapter. That saved us a whole lot of head scratching and also sort of focused us, because we could focus our conversations when we were brainstorming. We'd come up with an issue that really needs to be in this chapter, and then we'd debate, well, is that a basic or an icing? And that itself was very useful. And I think one of the utilitarian parts of the book is you can, when a coworker says, oh, we really, this new print system really needs such and such, and you can turn to the book and say, well, they classified that as an icing issue. You should, let's get it working before we fine tune it. And automation. I guess this is the part where I finally explain CBS. How many people here are familiar with CBS or just heard the term? Oh, this is great. CBS is a source code control system. So imagine a server somewhere out on the internet that has all these different files, and usually it's for a large programming project, and these would be all C or C++ files and data files like that. Each person in the project has the ability to check out a file from the repository, make changes, and then check it back in. And the repository keeps all past revisions. It's just storing the diffs, so it's very efficient, but the benefit of this is you can go back and say, what did this file look like on January 3rd? And it can pull that out of the repository. Or diff the January 3rd edition and the 3 releases ago, these kind of things. Now, there's a number of packages like CVS. There's RCS and SCCS and ClearCase. One of the nice things about CVS is it's concurrent. The C stands for concurrent. Two people can check stuff out at the same time. So, example, I could check out a chapter, make changes. She could check out the same chapter, be making changes. Let's suppose I check my changes in first. The repository accepts those changes. When she goes to check in her changes, it says, now wait, someone's already checked in some changes. So it carefully merges her changes into the repository. So, for example, if I only made changes to the beginning of the chapter and she only made changes to the end, it'll just automatically merge those in. But if we both try to change the same exact part of the file, it'll actually pull her into a browser and say, sort of show her both changes and require her to do a manual merge. So it's the greatest thing in the world for large projects. And there are projects with hundreds, probably thousands of programmers. Actually, I was going to say Linux, but they're now using BitKeeper. So there are projects like FreeBSD, which has hundreds of programmers, and everyone's simultaneously able to make changes and check them in a controlled fashion. We told our editor, or our publisher, about this, and she was blown away. She had no idea that this existed, and said that many of the books that are written by 2 authors, well, the authors have later commented that something like 30 or 40% of their time was spent managing the confusion over who's edited what chapter when, and making changes and emailing it to the co-author and getting it back and not being sure how to merge stuff in. We had none of those problems. It was all automated for us. Yes?
Do you happen to know if the authors that your publisher was talking about were technically savvy authors?
I assume that she meant her non-tech savvy customers, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Because, for example, I know Bill Cheswick's book is under CVS because when I was his sysadmin at Bell Labs, I knew what machine it was on. People say, there was this fluke. They accidentally, Amazon announced that their 2nd edition was soon to be out, and they were taking pre-orders, and it was like the #1 book that day. They were like 3 years from being ready. And people were like, damn, I had my hopes up. I thought I was going to get to buy the 2nd edition. I said, oh, I have access to the second edition. I guess I shouldn't have said that. But a lot of the tables are calculated with Perl. The backup chapter has these big tables of numbers estimating changes, percent of change to a file system and how that affects how many tapes you would need to get to do incremental backups. And those are completely generated by Perl scripts that there's essentially an include file that just sucks them into the LaTeX code. And that was really a lifesaver because I'm the laziest person in the world. And this way, I know that the numbers are correct because someone else did the calculations for me. And at the end, we realized that there was a mistake in them. And I was able to fix the bug in the Perl script and type make, and it just regenerated the tables. The bug was pretty small. It was that the bottom line showed percent change, and it was 0 based instead of 100 based. And the paragraph describing the table was the other way around. So changed the formula, everything worked. So who here is familiar with Make? Good. Make is the ultimate publishing tool, and I hear programmers use it now too. Because I also have not the greatest memory. So anytime I typed a command, I would, if the command worked, or once I debugged the command to the point that it worked, I would copy that into the make file. So for example, you can type make, and it does all the LaTeX processing to format the book. You can type make remake, and it wipes everything and does a full rebuild. You can type make CD-ROM, and it does the full LaTeX build, generates the PDFs and the PS files, and generates the .iso image that is what we would burn to a CD-ROM and send to our publisher. Now, what's the value in capturing that command? Well, how many times am I really going to have to burn this CD-ROM? Well, it turned out it took about 2 hours to get the right combination of options to the make ISOFS command, because that command has 10 billion options. And we actually did end up, I figured, well, I'll reuse this command when we get to the second edition. Actually, we did have to rebuild the image, so it was very useful. Though, here's a tip. Don't try checking an ISO image into a CVS repository. Because it says, oh, that's a binary. I'm going into binary mode. And some loser who wrote that code decided to suck the whole thing into memory and then save it in the repository. So, so you know, gee, we're getting out of virtual memory error. I wonder if that's happening on the client or the server.
Did you rewrite the CVS code?
Oh yeah, that's what I wanted to spend my weekends doing. No, we just don't check those files. But it also means we can't use CVS for these PowerPoint presentations, which we sort of fake it though. But I won't go into that. So CVS, if you look at it, it really does have the facility to sort of add plugins that would handle special files. So I'm sure one of you is doing like your PhD on a diffing program for binaries. You should make it as a plugin for CVS, and you'd make my life easier. And I'd make sure you won the raffle. Hey, let's do the raffle now. Wait, am I at a good... Yeah, this is a good stopping point for the raffle. We have all the...
Everybody, does anybody here not have a ticket?
When you describe it to your publisher as a system that manages these changes, and oh, it's accessible globally. So when I was on vacation in New Mexico, I was able to do stuff, and Chris was global, traveling the globe, and she was able to do stuff. This was just the most amazing thing to. It's funny, actually. One of the most shocking things about writing a book is learning how low tech the book publishing industry is. O'Reilly is the one book company that knows how to spell computer. And Addison Russell is definitely number 2 if you want a high-tech publisher. Addison Russell was high-tech enough to say, LaTeX? Yes. We have a consulting company that will do the formatting for us in LaTeX. And
It's called O'Reilly.
no, it's called ICC. But other companies, actually there's I won't say his name, but there's one author I know who his text was accepted,